job. I have some of these for you. Yeah, thanks for singing. Where's Miss Anna?
Yeah. I think she went out. She took her keys.
Would somebody go get her to tell her she's up? She'll know what that means. I thought it would be just curious for us to, you know how different we are. And thank God for most of those differences, because I'd be so inadequate without her. But
Oh, it is?
how many of you, when it came to buying a gift for your wife, just couldn't figure out exactly what to get her? Or about the time you had it figured out, she dropped you a hint that you realized it wasn't what you thought? Or, ladies, you were trying to drop hints and you realized that he just wasn't getting it. The communications thing, that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, that's just not enough planets apart. We come from different dimensions altogether. And like right now, she's nowhere around because she's doing something that's more important than this. And that, I don't know what to do about it. Well, it has to do with setting up for my whole message, and I have no idea where she's at. I hope she's okay. I don't really know because she left her cell phone at home. I would have to call her, but does anybody really know where she is?
She went out to the car. I saw her. She had her keys. I don't know what.
Why did she do that? Does anybody know? We prayed at the end of halftime and threw her off. She thought church was done. No, she's not that. She's not that bad kid. She's a good girl. Anyway, I will attempt to. Now, we don't have enough time for this, so I'm gonna attempt to go ahead and get my part done. It's always a challenge to know what to say about Christmas. There's what do you say? Jesus was born in a manger. He was the gift that God gave us. The angels came to the shepherds, and the wise men found a star, and everything turned out really good. Amen. And we could go home, you know. But if you do that, then they think about cutting your pay because you don't give them a full 20 minutes of preaching. So I can't do that. So I always try to come up with like a different slant. And there's this old song, All I Want for Christmas Is You. I was thinking that, you know, in truth, in reality, the whole idea of covenant has to do with not a 50-50 deal, but it's 100-100. Anna, we've been waiting on you. Yeah, you certainly do. Here, let me give you a microphone because you and I are so uniquely different that now these aren't exactly conversations that we've had because the conversations that we have are never the same. And so there have been times when a little bit, yeah. But
that season, it's that time of year.
Yes, it is. Come in and sit down and visit with us for just a little bit.
Let's just take a second.
So we're trying to figure out how to buy presents for each other. We got to laughing about some of the things that people do for how you discover what you buy somebody for.
How to keep secrets and how to figure out what they want without really coming right out and saying it.
Exactly, exactly. So
When we got married, I discovered a whole new way to do Christmas. First of all, they opened their gifts on Christmas Eve, which I always waited till Christmas morning. So Christmas morning came, and it was kind of a letdown for me. And I would wrap a gift and then make sure all my corners were perfect, and bows and ribbons and little toys on the, I mean, everything. And he and Jasper and Randy would go to Walmart.
no, the Western store.
Oh, excuse me. I've seen Walmart though. So they would just say, this is what I want, okay? And they'd hand it to each other, and they, like Dorothea was talking about with her dad,
We would
slide it
give
under the Christmas tree, not wrapped, in the bag. And I'd be like, that is not the way to do it. That's how
Well,
we
we
do
give
it.
each other a budget and say, what, we'll buy anything you want for $100, okay?
So for the next 41 years, Christmas has been an evolution of how to do this and do it well. And you try to figure out what each other wants without just coming right out and say it, because I said, don't just tell me this is what you want for Christmas. There's got to be some secret, some allure to it.
She says, surprise me.
Yeah.
And I said, every day that happens with you.
And you have actually surprised me.
Occasionally,
You
yes.
accused me of talking in code,
Yes, she does talk in code.
so that brings us.
And I've gotten better at listening to
Yeah.
code. So let's give them a little example of how
Here's an example
horrible I
of
am at
sometimes
it.
how it can go.
Yeah.
So we came up with this little skit in our mind, and it was so funny.
Yeah, but it's not that funny here, but still, it's just funny.
I'm gonna stick with it because you.
Okay.
So I said, this is an example of how you try to, he would say to me, so what do you want for Christmas? And I would say, oh, I had this phone call today at the office, and this guy was just so off the wall, I couldn't figure out what he wanted. And
Off the wall.
so in his mind, he's thinking, is she giving me a hint for what I
Something
want for
off the
Christmas?
wall. So she doesn't want a picture.
I'm totally not even in the same conversation. Man, the wheels just fell off when I was talking to this guy.
Since she's a flight attendant, wheels up, wheels off. She wants to go someplace where you have to fly. It's a present, or she needs a new set of tires. I can't figure it out.
And randomly in a conversation, I might say something like, did you change the ringtone on your phone? I was on the phone and I heard
Ringtone.
something.
Earrings. Carrots. iPhone? You want a new phone? Oh, no. Okay. Yes, I think it's a great idea.
So
Ugh.
then when I would figure out what he was trying to do, I'd be so embarrassed. I feel like such a dumbbell.
No. We've been going to the gym. Maybe I should buy her a year gym membership. You know how well that went over.
Yeah, the whole don't get me anything for Christmas.
Oh yeah, every guy in the church knows that that's a, don't buy that one. Don't buy that one, that's terrible.
And then, like if I was to sneeze, achoo, and you,
Oh. Was that a sneeze or was she wanting a hat? Hat, shoes, or shoes? Hat, shoes, a Stetson, or a pair of boots?
and then griping about the guy on the phone, I would say, he is so fired.
Fired. It is shoes. She wants boots. The guy gave the boot. I don't know. She's so far away in the code, I can't keep up with her.
Does anybody else have this problem in marriage, though? One person says one thing and you hear another? Okay, yeah. Hands
I
everywhere.
see that head. I see that head.
It's just a comical, aggravating, infuriating part of marriage. Don't you ever listen to me? You don't listen to a word I say. I heard everything you said. I didn't hear you say it, So we got tickled at that. He's right, it was way funnier at our table when we were sitting down doing this. But we can both say in unity that we wish you a Merry Christmas. We really want you to have a great Christmas. We feel loved by you and we love you. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
No code?
No code. No code. I finally got your hint though.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, you had a laser facial.
Nailed it.
I got it. I got it. Anyway. Thank you. So all I wanted for Christmas is you, when you're trying to figure out all the presents, the whole idea of covenant has to do with giving 100%, not 50%. A marriage deal, if one will give 100%, the other will give 100%, what you have is you have enough to fulfill the deal, and you have enough to put half of it back in savings for when somebody messes up. So if it's 50-50, one of you is going to fail, and you're not going to have enough to make things work right. So a covenant, it's God gave the perfect gift for covenant. He gave everything. He gave his only begotten son. He had one son. He gave it all. He gave 100%. He gave the most important, caring thing that he cared about was his only son. But he gave it for this reason. And he gave it, this reason is that God so loved the world. And we weren't able to connect with God. And so the present he gave was his son so that we'd have redemption. And you know, people keep trying to figure out who God is, why God does his stuff, and all of that sort of thing. But he writes it pretty explicitly in his word, and the foundation for everything within it happens in just a little point, and that little point is us accepting the gift that he gave. Now, from there on, it's different. How many of you are getting the same gift as everybody else in the congregation? It's a little different for everybody. And Christianity is really that way. It's basic. It's Jesus Christ. You can't get to heaven without him. But then when it begins to apply to your life, then it goes different ways. And I just wanted to go over a few of those just so that you know how important this is. The greatest gift was Jesus. How many of you have horses? Okay. How many of you have registered horses? And you think, why is that important? Well, you want to know how old they are. You want to know about their pedigree. You want to know about all the stuff that goes with it. And God understood that way of thinking. He sent Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and he sent two extensive pedigrees, one from his father's side and one from his mother's side. Have you? And they're almost full chapters long.
Yeah.
There's generation after generation after generation. It's a wonderful study. It's a great thing. So God so loved the world that he gave, and he gave the most important thing he could give. And who he gave had this pedigree that's important. How many of you have a registered dog? Okay. I've got to looking at dogs. Dogs and horses are completely different, you know.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if you knew that. Being at a cowboy church, I shouldn't assume anything, but I just assume that you already know that. But they've got these new dogs, and so they've got tired of the same old dogs with the same old pedigree, so now they start mixing them, and they're really mutts, but they come up with a fancy name and they can sell them for a lot of money, you know, like a Labradoodle or something like that. I have discovered that I can come up with an old man dog, just called an old man dog. He has to have wrinkles, so he has to have a sharp head, and then he's boxers and bulldog, and he comes with his own recliner. Just call it an old man dog. But there's so many things that are fun with pedigree. You know, horse people can sit down and talk pedigrees for hours. They can't remember their grandkids' names, but they can remember the horse's generation for years back. And so I don't know why all that's important, but it's important to some people, and God knew it was important, so he gave these pedigrees, and everybody else has to go, why are all of these things in here? But the people who understand how important pedigrees are, we're looking for the real thing and the real deal. And Jesus is the real thing, the real deal. And I just thought it'd be a nice thing for you to consider. Here's just a couple of things in the gifts that Jesus gave as it went through, and he personalized these. The first one was to Joseph and Mary, or Mary and Joseph. Mary, you talk about Mary and Joseph having a different experience about this. Mary, the angel came to her and says, you'll have the Son of God, and he's going to be the only begotten Son of God, And you get to be the girl who gets to bear and raise the Son of God, born of a virgin, and that person is you. And Mary rejoiced in it. She was so excited. Joseph heard that she was pregnant, and it was not a delight to him as it was to her. I mean, sure, you call him the Son of God. Sure. You know, the impulse would be, come on now. You know, this stuff doesn't just happen. Something happened there, and what happened is going to mess us up forever.
Right.
This is important to me, and Joseph is having to deal with all this because he really loved her, but he's having to deal with, what do I do here? And back then, it was really an important issue. And he's having to deal with it, and look what God did. In the middle of Joseph's consternation, God sent an angel
Praise God.
to calm him.
Yes, praise God.
Said- And I don't remember the exact words, but it went something like this. Joseph, hey, Joseph, chill. I don't know all the words he used, but that's what his message was. Says, you realize that you get to be the one to raise, as your adopted son, the Son of God. And guys, man, what we need to understand is we need to understand God's perspective on how things work. If we only have the world's perspective, we jump in and try to do something and tear it up and mess it up because we have a perspective that has to do with the way the world thinks about it. But when we have the perspective of how God thinks about it, something good comes of it. Something good comes. And when Joseph finally got a hold of the fact that this was the Son of God and that they were the honored couple, and she, his wife-to-be, was probably the most honored lady that would ever be in the history of the world. Now, how do you feel about it?
Different.
Yeah. The shepherds. I get a little understanding about shepherds. Shepherds back then had to do with the whole ranching community. It wasn't just sheep. They called them shepherds, but remember when Joseph's brothers and family came to Egypt? They said, we're shepherds because we take care of cattle. The shepherding thing was, you know, the Old West messed it up. They divided it up between sheep herders and cattlemen, and they fought. But back then, in the Bible, the word shepherd is all about the ranching community, whether it's sheep, whether it's cattle. And so when you come to Shepherd's Valley Cowboy Church, it's not because we have a bunch of sheep in here, even though we do. It's because this is the entire ranching and farming community, and it's represented by shepherds. So the shepherds at that point are the guys who didn't go to college, who some of them didn't finish high school, some of them weren't able to fit into the mechanical world or all of the stuff that goes with technology, and weren't able to work at the iPhone factories and all that, you know, all that sort of thing. They got to be the shepherds because that was the only thing left for them to do, because everybody can feed a sheep. And so here they are as shepherds, and the great gift was that God thought so much of them, our culture, our people, that the first people, when Jesus was born, that he went to tell about it, was our guys. Isn't that cool? Yeah. It was the cast outs, or outcasts. They went told that the angels were, now the angels, they were happy. You know what angels do when they get happy? They sing. And so the place they went to sing is where the people that God really cared for, which is us. And I got, when we were over there, Kurt keeps talking about our visit to Israel.
Yeah.
We got to visit the cave area in the pasture where they think, that the angels came to visit the shepherds. Yeah. And so we got to go in a little cave area where they kept the sheep, and we got to sing some Christmas carols and different kinds of things. And so it was a pretty sweet deal to sit there and realize the announcement of the Son of God to the shepherds was given right here in this area. Right here in this area. It wasn't much bigger than our parking lot out there. And it had a little cave area, and the cave was probably about as big as our platform. Maybe a little bit bigger. The angels, they sang to God. God was tickled with this moment because he created mankind so he could have fellowship with him at man's choice. And he didn't live up. Now he had a gift to give that would intercede and connect between mankind and him. And now we were going to be able to enter into the presence of God. And our prayers could be directed to God. They didn't have to go through somebody else. And we could be,
Thank you, Jesus.
we could be God's people. And we could have fellowship directly with God. How many of you are parents whose kids have moved out of the house? How many of you enjoy, for the most part, when you get to eat at your house and the kids come home to eat? They get home to visit. Don't you enjoy that? Just to have them back in the house? That's how God felt about the kids, us, that we're now making redemption so we can experience a fellowship called koinonia that is best expressed as the meals and the fellowship we have around meals. And so koinonia is such a precious time to God. And what he wanted is for us to enjoy koinonia with him. The Gentiles, it says to the Gentiles, and you just read through Luke chapter 2, you get to verse 32, it says to the Gentiles and the people of Israel. Now, what we understand here that Israel is God's chosen nation. God's chosen people is Israel. But when Jesus came and died on the cross, he was to be the advocate for, and look how they put it, the Gentiles, us, and the people of Israel. See? What's really cool is that on a personal level, we can all be the same. On a national level, God uses the nation of Israel to show us how we live as a nation, we should live or shouldn't live, how we should or shouldn't live as a person. Individually, we still connect directly because of Jesus Christ. And guys, what this means is that the races of the world, all of the races of the world, now have access to the Father because of Jesus. Just a cool thought. And to us, here's the us part. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever, that's the us, whosoever believeth on him should not perish but have everlasting life. God so loved the world. It's an interesting thing to think that we have, because of the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we now have access with God for now, but we have a permanent covenant that's going to last throughout eternity. And then the last thing, and you'll really like this, because the last few weeks I've been talking about volunteers, and I love volunteers. So here's the volunteers. In verse 25, it talks about Anna, and it talks about Simeon in 37 and 38. The Bible says about Anna that she served in the temple with fasting and prayers, and she was righteous and devout. And when they brought Jesus to the temple, 8 days to have him circumcised, she saw the little baby, and she was close enough to God that inside she identified this is the Christ child. And her life was complete because she got to see the fulfillment of all the prophecies of God. And she realized it and recognized it because she was sensitive to God. And she learned how to be sensitive to God by being a volunteer. Why do I love volunteers? Right here. Simeon, the Bible says that he was a slave, but he served in the temple serving God with fastings and prayer. And when he saw Jesus, he said, this is the fulfillment of prophecy, and this is the answer that God gave me, that I would get to see the Christ child. And he blessed God. And he got to experience what we get to experience today. It was the volunteers. Why am I so taken with volunteers? Because they have a special place in God's plan. Why am I so interested in the down and out? Because they have a special place. Why am I so interested in the shepherds and the ransom community? They have a special place. And this morning, the special gift that God's given is his son, Jesus Christ. An understanding covenant, an understanding code of how this giving thing is supposed to happen. The giving thing is this. What do you give? What do you give to say it's worthwhile? There's only one thing that works in covenant. There's only one thing that works in the code. And that one thing is you. He doesn't want anything more. He doesn't want anything less. Just what do you have to offer? For what it's worth, here it is. Yeah. The greatest gift we ever received is Jesus. The greatest gift that we can give him is us. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for how you individualize every single encounter. And yet it's always the same. It's about the gift. It's about the covenant. Lord, today we just rededicate our life to you. We give this as a great gift to you. Not that we're anything, but that you are. And you make us what we never dreamed we could be. So thank you for allowing us to participate and accept our gift and accept your gift and say thank you for the greatest gift-giving season of the year. Lord, may we honor you with our gifts, our giving, our family. And may we recognize you in every aspect of this great season. We love you, Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen. Now we started a tradition that I don't want to give up on. At the end of our services, we start opening up the altars. If you feel like you would like to bring your family to the altar, if you feel like you'd like to spend a little time at the altar, if you need somebody to pray with you, if you haven't given your life to Jesus yet, ask him to come into your heart. We're going to have some of our prayer people line up along this wall back here. And we ask if you just, you can just leave if you need to. That's fine. We understand everybody's pretty busy. And it's a great season. I don't want you to miss out on any of it. But from about this third pole here back is the talking area. From about that third pole up, we're going to have a praying area, quiet area. And we can do that. If you'd like to pray and just take your family and recommit to God, or have a prayer with your family, or a prayer with one of our prayer partners, you can do that. And we're going to be dismissed. God bless you. You guys have a Merry Christmas. Have a great time. Let God minister to you this time. He loves you.